Hello and welcome to Shooter Stories. This is a show where we talk to military photographers, both current and veterans, about some of the work they've done and some of how their military experiences relate to their civilian work and a little bit of how they created the images that they've been making. Joining me today is a friend of mine, C.S. Muncy. C.S. Muncy is an Air Force reservist photographer, also a freelancer in New York City. He shot for New York Times, the Daily News, Newsday, DNAInfo, the Village Voice. Really, anything in New York City that's ran photos, C.S. is probably freelance for them. He went on assignment to the Gulf Coast during the oil spill. He went to cover the union protests in Madison, Wisconsin. You've been all over the place. Before we get into the photos, we want to ask you first what it's like to take your military experience as a photographer and apply that as a civilian photographer.
Sure. So the best thing I could say is that it's not that different shooting on the military side as it is for the civilian side. You still have to show your editors the same respect you would show for your office managers, for your visual information managers. You still have to work under those kind of heightened conditions. But the thing is, the biggest difference is your time management. When you're shooting on the military side, you have a lot more time to work with your images, to pick out your selects. You can really just take them back to the office and work on, make sure that they're cleared for release before you send them out. Whereas on the civilian side, you're working under not only an extremely tight deadline, but you're looking to beat out the people who are working around you. So you have minutes to pick out your selects from what is probably hundreds, if not thousands, of shots. So you have to pick out maybe a half dozen shots out of 1,000. I'm just picking a number out of a hat. But you have to pick out an extremely small number of selects, make sure that they're appropriate, and that there's nothing wrong with them, nobody's making a weird face or doing something odd. And then get them to your editor. So wherever you're at, you have to be able to file them. So it's really just your time management skills that's the biggest difference between the two.
Now, as a military photographer, of course, you got trained at Fort Meade, Maryland, the Defense Information School. Of the stuff you learned there, what has served you the best as a civilian photographer?
I think it's a willingness to throw yourself into a situation. I think before I went to Fort Meade, I was a little bit more timid when I was covering a story. I would tend to stay back a little bit. I would tend not to push myself to the front, whereas after Fort Meade, you really kind of learn that in order to get the shots, you really have to be right there. And you have to be a little bit more aggressive in your shooting style.
And now Fort Meade is where the military, of course, trains military photographers and videographers. Not everyone coming into the military has a background in photo or video. You had a background in photo coming into the military, right?
I did. I freelanced for a couple of different papers out in California and Nevada before going into the military.
And so do you notice a difference in the way you approached being a photographer with that military training?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. As I said, you know, it's for lack of a better description, it's. Sorry, I'm trying to think the best way to describe this. You do learn to be a little bit more aggressive in your shooting style. You learn, especially now that I'm shooting digital as opposed to film, you can shoot a little bit more, giving you a few more options to pick from. You know, but it hasn't changed a ton, but it is a little different, yeah.
Okay. We're going to take a look at some of your images now. You've been shooting for years, so obviously there's a lot of stuff to go through. If people want to see your entire portfolio, contact you, or just learn more about your shots, of course, your website is what again?
It's csmuncyphotography.com. And I also I write for a photo blog called The Photo Brigade, so that's thephotobrigade.com.
And we'll put the links to both those in the caption section on the YouTube page, so people can grab the link to your website and to your blogs at Photo Brigade. So let's jump into some of the photos and let's take a look at your work. here's one of the shots that really struck out at me. Well, first, just tell us what we're looking at here.
This is the 106 Rescue Wings Fire Department. They're doing training in West Hampton Beach, and they're doing it with a number of other Long Island firefighting units. And what they did here is they brought out a practice aircraft. It's literally a full-size aircraft that they can just set fire to. And what they were doing is they were training on how to bring people out, how to put the aircraft, how to put the fire on the aircraft out. And I was lucky enough that they let me suit up and literally trail right in with them. One thing
I've seen lots of photos of these fire exercises, but I don't think I've ever seen one this close to the water, and you can tell with all the water spraying that your camera is right in that area. How did you make sure your camera was going to be okay capturing this?
Well, I didn't actually realize that they were going to be spraying us down as we walked in. It makes sense in retrospect. This thing is incredibly hot, but so I didn't have my camera really prepared. Thankfully, I was shooting on the D3, which is pretty weather sealed. I wouldn't dunk it underwater or anything, but it held up pretty well. And the only thing I could do was literally just tuck this camera right into my chest and try and protect it with my body as much as I could.
How wet did the thing get?
Oh, it was soaked.
And it still worked?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I made sure to dry it off because a lot of the water that was being pumped out, it's not really clean water. So, as soon as I was done, I toweled it off, but it was pretty thoroughly soaked.
All right. We're going to go to another shot of yours that kind of highlights something that you and I have talked about before. We're going to flip through a couple of these and just kind of get an idea on the kind of shots that you make. But it's these shots of the fires, especially something like this. We're looking at what an overhead shot. Oh, sorry. Here we go. So we're looking at a pretty high elevation shot of firefighters going after a fire here in New York City, and we've talked about this, like I said before. How'd you get this angle?
Well, originally I had been working on the ground level. This is a fire at 61 Spring Street. This took place was it the night before last, and I had arrived there, and I got there pretty early on. I beat out most of the other photographers and videographers there, but at the time I got there, they were just beginning to push the crowds back. So I got some good scenes on the ground, but nothing that really rocked my socks. And, eventually I was just I was being conspicuous, and the cops were starting to give me a hard time about it, and I think I was starting to get in the way, so I decided at a certain point it's time to pull back. And I started looking around, and this is an incredibly crowded scene. There's a park right across the street with really no access. There's trees everywhere, so staying on the ground wasn't really an option. And one of the things I did bring back from DINFOS is actually something that I picked up from spending a few time with the Marines out there. And I'd been lucky enough, they let me photograph some of their mount training. And one of the things I picked up from that was to think in any environment, in a 3D environment, what are your other options? What's around you? What's behind you? What's above you? And I started looking around, and I realized there's a building right across the street that's going to have the perfect angle. So I literally just started buzzing on doorbells at random, and this really nice old lady let me in, and I climbed up onto the roof.
So it's just, hi, I'm C.S. Muncy. Can I climb up to your roof?
Pretty much. I said I'm a news photographer. I'm really trying to capture the scene. Is there any way I could get up there? And like 9 times out of 10, you either won't get a response or people just will say no. But this lady was really nice. She just buzzed me through. I saw her on the way up. She asked if I was okay, and just said, yeah, the door of the roof's that way.
It's an amazing thing trying to hunt for that different way of showing off the story. I'm gonna flip through. Want to go over maybe one or more with you while I've got you here. The last one we're going to take a look at is you shot at Fleet Week.
I did.
And Fleet Week, for those who don't know, it's about a week long where there's sailors and Marines that come up here to New York City, and they kind of take the town on with events going on. But the big show is when they first come into New York City, and you should be looking at here a picture of the Marines coming into New York Harbor, and it was one of the unique shots that came out. I remember the New York Times Lens blog, I think, featured it at the time. I just want to kind of go over how you created that shot.
Sure. So this is aboard the USS Iwo Jima, which is a marine landing vessel. I had been sent there by the New York Times. I've covered Fleet Week for the New York Times, I think a total of 3 times. I believe it's 3 times. So I had flown out there. I spent the night on the ship, and we were just coming into the harbor. And as the sailors and the Marines lined the deck, I realized sitting in the center of the flight deck really wasn't giving me anything that creative. So what I did is I kind of, again, this is getting into the being more aggressive in how you shoot. I kind of pushed my way to the front of the vessel, right in front of the Marines, and at first I felt kind of guilty about it, and I apologized, but they really didn't care. And I realized that as we were coming through, we're going to be passing the Statue of Liberty, and I realized that having, those leading lines of the white hats and the uniforms and whatnot going straight to the Statue of Liberty would make for a hell of a shot. So I just waited, and I must have waited. It was a while. It felt like I don't know, maybe a couple hours, maybe not so much, but it was a good long time. I was literally on my knee in front of all these guys at the very front of the vessel as we rolled in. And once we rolled in, the Statue of Liberty came into view, I realized that I was only going to have an extremely short period of time to capture this shot. And it just, serendipity, everything seemed to work out.
Awesome. Well, so that was 3 of your shots. Obviously, like we said, you've been shooting for a while. Before we get you out of here, I just want to get your take on what's it take to become a freelance photographer? What is your day in the life like?
It's tough because it's definitely a hustle. I work full time with the 106 Rescuing now, but in about 2 months I'm going to be returning to freelancing full time. And you can have really good weeks. For instance, this week I had a spectacular week. And other times you have dry weeks, and those can be terrifying. You have to be ready for that. You also have to be very flexible in your schedule. You have to literally be willing to just drop everything and go. With the fire at Spring Street, there was a police-involved shooting, and then there was the pier incident. At Pier 11, there was a ferry that hit the pier, and there were a number of injuries. And I literally had probably about 30 seconds to decide, am I going to get up and go cover the story? And the answer always has to be yes. The moment you turn down a story for an editor, then they're going to stop thinking of you.
And what's it like? Why do you love it so much? Why do you go through the hassle of doing it? What makes you love getting out the door and running into these scenes?
Well, I mean, it's great that you can say, you were there, that you saw these things, not just the bad things, but the good things. I love being able to say, yeah, I've been to the past 2 inaugurations. I'm planning to go in the upcoming one next week. I love being able to say that I photographed the shuttle launch, and these are all very narcissistic reasons, but it's great. You see history in action. How can you not love that?
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be a crazy life, but it's awesome. There's folks out there covering the beat like that. Any last parting tips or things you want to throw out there for someone who's looking to do what you do?
I would say again, be aggressive. Always be willing to just drop whatever you're doing, even if you're. I feel guilty because I've my fiance. I've had to jump out from dinners before to go catch something, and thankfully, she's an angel. She's put up with it for far longer than she should have. Always be willing to pick up your gear. Always carry your gear with you, no matter where you're at, and have all your editors on speed dial.
Fantastic. Hey, CS, thanks again for your time here. Of course, CSMuncyPhotography.com is where you can find all of your information, and the Photo Brigade is where you blog about gear. And like I said, we've got the links to those in the captions for this video. Again, CS Muncy, Air Force photographer, New York Times, Daily News, DNAInfo, everything New York City freelancer. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thanks a lot.